functions you are whatever equals, and then in your refresh and then that works.
All right, so we'll get started. So last class we did more delegation, more within notification center. We talked about a single pattern a little bit. So let's do one more review of delegation pattern, and then we'll stop reviewing that. But here's value, and that's just doing one final day of reviewing high level how things work. So can someone walk me through delegation pattern? So we have two boxes, right? VC1 and VC2. So what's going on with these controllers, the views?
So in VC2, we just have a protocol.
Yep.
And a delegate that's equal to an optional of that protocol.
Yep. Okay.
VC1 is to conform to the protocol.
Yeah.
You need to write a function in VC1.
Yep. So runs, and then the protocol here needs to also have a function, right? Okay.
And you need to make this self in VC1 equal to the delegate that's in
So exactly. So we find VC2 and set the delegate there. Equals self. Right, and that points this one. And then we switch over, right? Easy as that. Right. I mean, it's a lot easier after you do it over and over again, right? It's just passing information back and forth. It's a few steps, but
Something else you need to do in VC2, you need to call the function in
Yeah.
VC1.
so before switch. Call delegate. Delegate function.
So if this is only to pass information from VC2 to VC1.
Yep.
This doesn't this can't be used to pass information from VC1 to VC2.
Nope.
So if we need to do that, if we need to pass information back and forth, so let's say we need to send information first to VC2, and then from VC2 we need to send that information back to VC1. We would have to do everything like that again except a mirror on top of it. So we have to make another protocol in VC1 and a delegate in VC1.
Well, delegation starts by the first one, allowing access, and then going back to the first one. So if you just want to go from here to here, pass information to there, these are the methods. And we'll go over the methods in a minute.
That's a good question.
And Tyler, one more time, please run through it step by step. So when to set up protocol, 2 will become MVC2, VC1, you want to conform to the protocol. You want to go back to VC2 and delegate the protocol. And then what's that fourth one? Or the second one, VC1.
Huh?
Yeah, no, second one to VC1.
So in VC1, before you switch over to VC2, you have to find VC2, and then set the VC2 delegate to be self, meaning the delegate here points to VC1. And then final two steps are VC2 before switching calls delegate the function, and because this delegate in VC2 is pointing to VC1 to this self, we can then run that function on behalf of VC1. And then VC1 does something with data, right? From the function. And this is how table views work. Table views, those functions that we fill the rows and sections and content and cells in. That's essentially what's happening. By inheriting from UI table view controller, UI table view controller has a delegate in there. A delegate is what's running those functions that we have with us. All right, so I want to tell you about the notification center. How does it work?
You have a
Observer,
Observer.
and you have a broadcaster, you have a key.
Let's actually stick to observer for a second. What's the observer? What do you need for the observer? What?
Was it NS? I know it's an NS notification.
That's the class that we can call it, right? So notification center is we call center, right? So there's a few properties that we're going to be entering here.
name.
Yeah, name. And name is
That's the name of the function you're gonna call it?
no, name is what we listened for. That's the key.
String.
Okay. Selector. And selector is the function that we run. And we enter the function name in the form of a string, right? It's a string with a colon at the end.
Object is
Yeah, object, no.
Unless you want to break the rules.
Must not break the rules. Why is it bad to pass data in the object?
It's always running.
Because what?
It's always running. And
Yeah.
it's just a memory.
Yeah. Yeah, it has the memory, that's right. Because it's, what kind of pattern is it starting off?
Delegation pattern. Stacks.
Nope, singleton pattern. The singleton is where you only have one instance of the class. And because it's a singleton, it's running constantly in our memory. So the notification center is a singleton that we always have access to from all of our controllers of our classes. And because we have this thing that's always running, if we keep dumping data on there, our application runs slower. And it's just this, you know, besides that, it's also a bad practice because they're not supposed to be used for that. They're supposed to be used for triggering stuff.
Where are we supposed to put the observers in? Like anywhere or?
In your view load, usually. Or in a function that's called view load.
So the function that we'd actually be calling, I guess, the broadcaster?
And what?
Never mind.
Okay, so we have our observers, and you mentioned the broadcaster, right? How does it work?
Whenever we want to hit that selector function, we just call it that keyword.
Yep. Trigger the name. So we set up an observer, we have something broadcast, and this could be either something that we set up ourselves, custom, right? Or something that iOS runs for us, right? What are some of those examples?
Text and change, keyboard pop-up.
Keyboard pop-up. Yep. And then finally, after this runs, this gets triggered, and then the function runs, right? In the function, we had one requirement. We need to have a perimeter here, right? This is an MS notification. Right? This is something some folks that haven't on last time is we need to always have the perimeter in our functions that you run on behalf of an observer. We need to always be able to send information here. right. Any questions on this? There is too early. This is significantly easier than delegation, right? A lot less steps. All right, so we've covered a good portion of fundamentals for Swift. We've done classes, we've done objects, so we're now starting to wrap our head around how instances are being how objects are being instantiated in iOS, right? How we're calling objects from classes, how we're calling data from structs, how we build our own models, right? So the next logical step of progression is getting more familiar with views, so we can start tying things together more. So we've done views through Interface Builder, and we've tied views to our controllers through our Interface Builder connections, right? So next step is we want to be able to add views programmatically, right? There's scenarios where we're going to present views based on user actions, right? So a user taps something, we present a view or remove a view based on their action, right? Now, one way that we could do that from what we know right now is we could dump all the views in our scene, and we could hide them and then display them, right? That's one way of going about it, but it's very inefficient. We have stuff just hanging out there, hidden, which is causes lots of memory hogging. And it's not a good program best practice. I don't want to have all these things that are hidden and display them and hide them all the time. It's okay to do that for certain situations, but you want to be able to display things programmatically, right, conditionally. So we'll get into views, and we'll get into kind of creating our views programmatically, dumping them in our storyboards manually. And on the second half of the class, we're going to start talking about auto layout, which is essentially positioning of our views. There's 3 ways we could position things in iOS. We'll cover really 2. There's a third one called strings and struts, but we're not going to touch that because updated auto layout is superior, and it's restrictive as well. So we'll go over why it's restricted when we go over that portion. But yeah, I want to first get familiar with adding views to our storyboards programmatically, going through kind of some of the objects that we get from Interface Builder, and just going through the motion of adding them through storyboard, and also testing these in our playgrounds. Right? Playgrounds, we've only worked with code on, but they actually allow us to import UIKit and add views through there, run views through there. Questions, concerns? So before we get started, if you refer to this really quickly, there's some baseline I want to cover about views. There's kind of some nomenclature and kind of some processes I want to talk about. So UI view, everybody's familiar with, right? That's what that's our main view. That's our kind of rectangle. And pretty much everything in iOS, and really any programming language, is mostly going to be rectangles, right? It might be deceptive because it might look like a circle or it might look curved, but everything is a rectangular or a square box, right? We just have images and we just manipulate those views in a way that might appear that way. So everything is a rectangle. So with that in mind, a rectangle has 4 points, right? So the way we draw things, we have a starting point. So we have an X and a Y in the coordinate system. And the iOS coordinate system, the very top left is 0, 0. And increases going right and down. So Y, the lower you go, the higher it is. X, the more to the right you go, the higher the number is, right?
So the first one is X and the second one is Y?
Yep. And these are called points, CG points. So CG point is an XY coordinate. So our CG point starting out here would be something like, let's say, 10, 20. Next is the CG size. So CG size is a mix of width times height. So this might be something like 200 by 100. So knowing our starting point and our size, we have all the information we need to draw our rectangle, right? We have a starting point, and we know how wide to make it, how high to make it, and there's no complicated details. Then we have a CG rectangle, which includes x, y, width, and height. So everything we add to our storyboards, to our scenes, has a frame. And the frame, the way it's placed in our coordinate system, in our views, is by this CGRect value. The CGRect is a struct that accepts 4 values, x, y, width, and height. Now, so the frame is kind of our size here, and our relationship to our parent view, right? So our parent view is essentially our main view in our view controller, right? So we add this view in our view controller. So this is the sub view, the parent view, the super view is this one, right? So the frame is my size and my placement in relation to my parent. So that's the frame. The frame, the x-y coordinate is also always in relation to the parent. There's one other value, which is the bounds. And bounds has the same properties as our frame. And this is a bit backwards to think about because we haven't worked with the scroll view yet. But bounds refers only to the inside of our rectangle. So it has a size and a coordinate system on the inside. So right now, I'm just like, what the hell does it mean, right? What that means is we have scroll views, which are also views. And scroll views only reveal a certain amount of information. This is our scroll view. And we'll go over scroll views next week. So our frame here might be something like 200 by 400, right? However, the rest of our content might be like 200 by 800. So our bounds are 800 height, but our frame is 400. So we only reveal this much. And as we scroll, we move our XY coordinate into the slower position. Yeah.
Does the X also move or is just the Y?
It's up to us.
Okay.
It's infinitely modifiable. So we're not going to worry about bounds today. Bounds really pertains to scroll views. Actually, table views as well, because if you think about it, table view, if you have a whole bunch of cells, we only show what's on the screen, right? The user can scroll down. So table view is what I meant is scroll view, because you can scroll, and you just scroll with those bounds and change. But again, we're not going to worry about this today. So frames are only relative to itself in the context of the parent, right? Questions so far? It's really all a whole bunch of fancy names for different ways of saying x, y coordinate and width and height. That's really all it is.
What do they choose as starting point to? What do you choose their axis to be inverted and will be using everything else?
Because when you move the phone, if you started down here and you switched, when you switch the phone, landscape becomes a bit right?
And also for scrolling, I guess, since you scroll down and you start always at the top.
Yeah.
For different pros, like what's this? Is there a width size for each one that we need to like? I guess we're looking for strengths. Like my 5 is not as wide as my 6 plus something like that. Point,
Yeah.
Number of points in the screen.
That's why we don't want to really do much absolutes when it comes to overall layout. You might want to do absolutes for small elements, additions of elements, but when it comes to relating kind of this view in relation to the overall context of my phone, we don't want to set standard widths because widths we don't have control over. So we want to break free of this mentality of, and the web's also in the same place with responsive design, right? We're going to break free of this kind of absolute sizing and positioning. We want to always kind of relate things to how they perform and react to the parent view. So we'll start originally by placing things programmatically on our phones or on our programs, absolutely, and then we'll switch to auto layout and do things to interface builder and do them relative with each other. Questions?
What was the green thing on the left here again? That was the bounds.
At balance.
So the bounds extends over the frame. The bounds basically means like if the content is like much bigger than the frame itself, it just extends over and uses invisible.
Exactly.
I saw some tutorial, I need to like look at it again. Where they were talking about how smooth scrolling works based off of how much data needs to load that's on the screen. Does that play into effect with the bounds also? Is that like
Yeah. So you mean smooth scrolling, like loading things as you're scrolling down, right?
Right.
And loading especially things and pulling from an API, right? Kind of like infinite scrolling. You'll be able to load as well. Yeah, so yeah, you're checking the bounds. It's in accordance to the frame.
Yeah.
And if the frame is hitting the bound where something's unloaded, that's when you reload it.
Okay.
We can work with that as well. That's how it also works for the web. In fact, maybe familiar with that, right? Infinite scrolling is it figures out where you are in the window and relative to your content. And if your window position is catching up to your content, as you start kind of preloading. So let's start a new project. All right, I'll call this programmatic views. And let's switch straight to our view controller. We're not going to do anything through our storyboard today. Well, none in this portion anyway. All right. So we'll start by just working on the view load. Then we'll start kind of moving things around afterwards. Let me make the screen larger here. So we start by creating a new instance of a class and dump into a variable. So we're familiar with that by creating instances of our own classes, right? So how do we create an instance of a class?
Just make it a variable and then you say, then you put a colon.
Yep. So I'll do a yellow box. And we can do this, but I'll just say UI view. And we'll actually make this a constant. So we have our yellow box, and what was the requirement that we need for all views? Yeah, X, Y, width, and height. So we set that to the frame. So we can say yellow box dot frame equals, and then those 4 pieces of information are what kind of a class? Yep, CG. CGRect. Yeah. So it's a CGRect. And we'll say x is 10, y is 10, width is 100, height is 100.
Is that a method from the CG rec? Or why is it called CG rec?
It creates a new CGRect. Just CGRect should work as well.
So we should do there now. Which one should we use?
CGRect should be fine. Why are you yelling at me?
If you don't have the arguments, y dot
Ah.
y colon.
Out of this.
Okay. And then it's also, what the heck? And 10, 100. We have to go with this because we're doing this outside of our UI view, and I'll explain it in a second.
Okay.
Not gonna be,
Yeah, both should have worked actually, but I think
I'll blame on mine work.
I think my Xcode is going crazy. There we go. Okay. Yeah, whenever that happens, you can do Command B and just build, and it might, if it's just going crazy, it might just have to override it. All right, let's give it a color. So yellow box dot background color and UI color dot yellow. So we have our view, but if I run this, it's not gonna show our yellow box. Does anybody know why?
We didn't
We
add
didn't just go-
Because what?
we didn't add it to the, we didn't like, but we didn't add it to like a sub view or something.
Exactly, yeah. Because right now, this just exists in limbo land, but it doesn't yet belong to our main view, to our view controller view. So every time we add something programmatically, we have to add it as a subview to our parent view. So to access our main view, we do self.view.add subview. And we'll say yellow box.
Nice.
So far, so good.
So CG rec gives you the size of the box and spacing, just not the.
And the position, yeah.
Yeah, the initial position?
Yep.
Because we. So the CG rect is not, so the frame and the initial position are the same?
So the frame is my position and my size. But the frame, when you first set it, it is the initial position.
Okay.
So initial position, it's whatever you set there. Let's also, for now, we'll add a button programmatically later, but in our storyboards, let's add a button. And let's tie this up to our controller. So we can have some fun with this. And we'll say this is an action, and we'll call this move yellow box. Move yellow box.
So our yellow box doesn't show on the interface builder because we put it in the load box.
Yep, because we're doing it programmatically. It would be nice if it did, but it's not smart enough. Yeah.
My view controller is showing it. That's view controller.
Are you trying to drag it? Okay. So and then you should show up on the right. Everybody caught up with this? So I want to make it so when we tap on our action button over here, we want to move our yellow box, right? So what do we have to change in our yellow box if I want to move it? The XY coordinates, right? But can I access my yellow box from this function here?
No, because it's scoped in the right one.
Yeah, it's scoped over here. And because the yellow box is defined in our Read Load, we don't have access to it over here. So if we add new objects that we're usually gonna manipulate through other functions, we usually, just like with dragging IP outlets, we usually define those at the very top. So we move the variable declaration to up here. I'll actually make this a constant. So then we can change the properties from here, that's fine. But now because we've declared our yellow box at the top, we have access to manipulate it from all of our functions, or all of our methods. So we still keep all this here. So from here, we should be able to say self.yellow box, right? The frame equals cgrect. And then we'll say coordinates of 100, 100, 100, 100. Yeah.
I'm getting an error when I try to add the action button. I was having trouble first pulling this up. And now I pulled up. Oh, that's weird. Looks like there's two buttons there, so maybe one of them is, maybe there's something wrong with that.
Oh yeah, you're right. There's a rogue button here. Huh. Okay. yellow box. It's really weird. View controller. No wonder. View controller. Huh. When you run it, everything's fine. For some reason, your view controller is. You might just have to recreate a new view controller. I'm not sure why that's.
Create a new project, right?
Let's do a new controller for now. Why is it in this object? That's weird.
Where it slides in.
Yes.
Why is this a problem?
Maybe. New view controller.
Slows down. Pretty cool tutorial.
And try this
Cool.
controller. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. He does like this one, he does like right from the mounts. At one point, quantity to for two pulse quality of fish.
All right. Yeah.
Thank
It was
you.
a buggy view controller. I'm not sure why.
So can I just delete that other one?
Yeah, you can just remove it.
Thanks.
Let's also make it so we're changing our properties, right? So we can also animate our properties changing. You guys remember the animation class? So it's UI view dot animate with duration. Say 1 second, and then we'll move our new frame within our animation.
So, one of the things that I don't understand is that we defined the yellow box on the left, which is a immutable constant.
Yep.
Yet we changed the property of its frame.
Yep.
So we first defined it, so isn't that changing, isn't that something you would only be able to do with the bar?
Normally with variables, yes. But what's happening here is this is a reference point, and the thing it's referencing is mutable. So we're not changing where this is pointing, we're changing the things that it pointed to.
Okay. So what you're saying is we're not changing the object yellow box, we're just changing the UI view of yellow box.
The reference point, yeah. So now if I was to do a yellow box equals new UI view, then it would yell at us. Everybody got the box moving?
It changed the height too, to kind of like
Yep.
evolve and get. Kind of interesting how it's like,
Yeah, it gives us some free
Yeah.
animation.
it's just kind of weird how seems difficult to go behind the scenes.
Yeah, we'll learn how to do what goes on behind the scenes as well. UI views has something called the CA layer and CA shape
Yeah.
underneath the views. So we'll go over the basics of that as well, and we can get a lot more control by controlling those.
Okay.
Questions here, guys? So we define our yellow box at the top, so we can reference it throughout our app, right? Throughout our view. Let's also add something else. Let's add another view and add it inside our yellow box. So why don't you guys walk me through this? I want to add a red rectangle box. So how would I go about that?
So you wanna add a, what?
So if I want to add in my yellow box, add a red rectangle right down here.
Inside the yellow box?
Yeah.
You follow the same process you did for creating their yellow box, where you insert it in self view, add some view.
Okay.
Sorry,
So
the yellow box that adds some view.
So red box dot frame equals CG rect make, and we're replacing this. This is going to be in relation to our yellow box, right? So we'll start giving it some absolute numbers at first, then we'll make things a bit more relative. So we'll just start with, on the X, start on the very left corner. And on the Y, we'll start at the very top corner. We'll make the width be 100, the whole width of the yellow box. And let's make the height like 30 points. Let's set the background color to be red. So how do I add this to my yellow box?
Yellow box does some, add some.
Yep. Self.yellowbox. Oh, because your button's all over here, right? So that's the universal view.
I didn't like coordinate them like that.
Red box. So red box is the yellow box.
We'll overlay that since we'd be able to get past this.
Auto layout will help us get rid of all these terrible things.
Yep.
Good.
That's really interesting.
I like deleted it.
I would have designed it so that 0, 0 is the middle. I would like redesign it. I'd say 0, 0 should have been in the middle. Like maximum should be 1,000 to each side.
So the action button, right?
I mean,
Easily change.
I think it's just like every screen's gonna be different. You want to have a maximum to the left, to the right, or up and down. So the only way to make it work would be to put it in the corner. Either the left, right, or bottom right. It would have to be in the corner. That's one thing that's gonna stay constant.
Have to repeat it. When you go into strength, it should fix it, but
Oh, thanks.
so we have our action button, right? And right now we're moving things, replacing things only by absolutes. We're making the assumption that we know where every coordinate is, we know where everything goes based on every action, right? Because we're saying, we were making the assumption that the top or the height and the width of the yellow box are 100 and it's larger than 30 high, right? So we're making the assumption that 100 will cover the whole width of the yellow box, right? So we don't want to do that. We want to start making a bit more educated guesses. So we'll actually start with, by changing the whole size of the yellow box to be the size of our overall view, right? So let's add another button. And we'll call it make yellow box full screen. Yellow box full screen. So I'll also make this animated. View.animate one. Boom.
Why with the animate with duration, why don't we need to put like a self? How is it automatically knowing what we should do as animate? Like, wouldn't there be a case where we want one thing to animate but not everything else to get the same view?
Yeah, so you can just move the things that want to animate out of this callback over here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we wanted two things to animate differently. We would
Oh, like
have
at
to-
different times?
Yeah.
Or different animations?
Yeah, like so let's say I want to animate the red box and the yellow box separately. So like I want the red box to grow inside the yellow box, but I want it to have like a half a second offset interval.
I see what you're saying. We'll go over that later.
Okay,
So if you enter both properties for changing here, they'll both change
right.
separately, but they'll happen kind of at the same time, right?
Yeah.
But so yeah, we're not there yet. It's a bit more tricky than that because that's when it comes to kind of multitasking and threading. We have to thread the way that animation works.
Yeah.
But we'll get there. Okay, so let's start with the same logic as above. So we'll do self.yellowbox.frame. And if we want the rectangle to cover the full screen, where is our top left coordinate? 0, 0. 0, 0. Now the width and height are a bit trickier, right? Because we have to make the assumption of our width being a certain width and our height being a certain height, right? And we can't because we can't possibly predict what phone the user is using or what orientation they're using, right? So we have to reference what to get that size? The super view, right? So we know how to access the super view because we added subviews, right? So we can do super.view .frame .width and super.view .frame .height. So this basically accesses the frame for our super view and returns the width and the height.
How do you change the z-index? That's not part of the frame, right?
The z-index?
Yeah.
You mean where it is? That's part of. That's actually a great question. Let's take a second here because z-index, for those of us who don't come from the web background, is basically you have two elements, right? So you have actually a parent view, and you have this element, and then you might have another element over here. So z-index is which one overlays which one. And the rule of thumb over there is whichever one was added last gets highest priority. Because subviews are essentially just an array of views. So you can either move the order of the views, or you can make this one a child view of this one.
So the one that you action to last is first.
Yep.
The highest.
Yep. So the thing appended at the back of the array is the first. So let's test this out. There we go. Pretty cool.
There's no difference in this case between super.view.frame than self.view.frame. It's the same thing.
Ah, yeah, I meant to actually do self.
How do you get him to stop channeling his build to his phone?
To stop what?
So
Oh.
he's running a build.
Oh yeah, just select from up here.
So he just has iOS device. He doesn't have anything else.
Really?
Because your phone call is an option.
No, it's not. Yeah, I read into it.
Yeah.
So this is my file that I sent.
We definitely changed the build too.
Do you rather watch this?
Oh,
Oh.
The z-index in web programming. It looks like,
Your devices.
It looks like no, there's something called labor position.
Woo, thank you.
Yeah.
One second.
So if I wanted to make this red box be the full size of my yellow rectangle, or the full width of my yellow rectangle, how would I go about that?
Super.view.
Is it super.view though? Because it's a child of what?
What'd you ask?
How do I make the red box be the full width of my yellow box?
You would, I would do self.yellowbox.
Yep.
Frame. Width.
Why can't you do super since it's the super is the yellow box. You added it.
You should be able to do super as well. But we're referring, no, it should be not, we can't do super, just yellow. Because we're referring yellow box that's part of this class. So super was just something that relates to, in the context of the overall view controller.
I thought the add some view.
Yeah, no, sorry to confuse, yeah, that was supposed to be self.
So wait, when does super, when do we use super? Super refers to the very parent class?
To the very parent, yeah. So there's really no reason to use super, bless you. Even when referring to that, you want to be more explicit and not to say super.
It's like you use the view controllers.
Yeah, sort of, essentially. You're going to the very top, yeah.
And a quick question. I know I came a little late, but the move yellow box, the function where the 100, that's just defining the width of the frame that you're going to move the box within.
Yep.
Okay.
And then what if I want to place this at the very bottom of my yellow box as opposed to the very top? This one's a bit trickier.
Self.view that sends and subview to back.
No, so to the bottom of the yellow box, not to the order, but at position to the bottom.
So you would do, if it's going to be 30, you would do self dot yellow box dot frame dot height minus
Yep.
30.
Does everyone understand why?
So you want to match the coordinate for the parent view. Y minus 10 though.
Actually,
It should be minus.
minus 30, yeah. Although, no, we don't even need the, oh, that's right, brain fart. So before we move on any further, there's a tool that becomes very useful as we're stacking views. So right now we have kind of child views, like subviews and super views, and parent views, right? So we want to be able to, when we debug this, to see what belongs to what. And Xcode gives us, when we're running our program, a debug tool to see the hierarchy of our views. So when your project is running, if you click on debug, and then go to view debugging, and select capture view hierarchy, it will show our program, but then we can rotate it and see how things are stacking on top of each other. So remember when I said buttons are a view with a label inside, right? So look at our buttons. There's a rectangle and a label, right? And there's our new view over here, our yellow box, and a red box, which is a subview of a yellow box, right? They're stacked. And then you also see our kind of phone window, and this white rectangle here is our main view, right? All this is a rectangle. That's the full size of our window.
Can you actually repeat how you got there?
Yeah, so when you're running your project, go to debug, and then view debugging, and then capture view hierarchy. And you can zoom in and out by pinching. You can rotate our views.
You have to be running it for it to be working?
You have to, yeah. It has to compile to be able to generate that. Otherwise, it doesn't know what views we have added programmatically, so it won't show us an accurate depiction of the hierarchy. So if I was to add the subview to our red view, it would stack in front of it, right?
Or did you just say if you make the red box before the yellow box, then it's behind it?
Yeah, if the yellow box was a child of the red box, a subview of the red box, then the red box will be behind the yellow box. Right, so it goes, parent is behind, child, subview is in front. So far, so good? Yep.
My red box didn't cover the width of the yellow box.
Yeah.
And I switched the width of it.
Well, it also gives us actually.
Oh, that's right. That's weird.
Okay.
Whatever one you did last.
Oh, it does cover it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, but when you, that's when you
The
move
last
the.
Oh, the debugging, well, yeah, it's in 3D.
No, I'm saying when you move the different sides, so you make it full screen it in.
Yeah, it's because we have to redraw the yellow box, that's why.
Gotcha.
So don't worry about that for now. That's where overlay is kind of useful. So far we've only added dry views, but we can also do the same thing with elements we're familiar with, right? Like labels or text fields. So let's do a text field. So let my text field equals UI text field. So basically anything we have access to our object library over here, we can add programmatically. And then same flow. So we could do self.myTextField.frame is a CGRect. And then we'll say 200, 200, 100, 100. And let's also give it a background so we can see it. Dot, what do I make it? Green. And then finally add it to our view. Actually, let's set some text as well. Self.myTextField.text is hello world.
We just want to change like the top point instead of different things like you in the bracket.
I'm sorry?
Is it if we don't want to make like a rectangle, we just want to move it by like the top left point, so you able to do that, and you have to change all four properties.
You have to change. Oh, so you only want to change one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You could change just if you want, but later. Initially, you have to set all four properties when initializing it. But later on, you can do something like self.myTextField.frame origin origin frame origin x or y equals 300. So you could set specific ones. So if you're gonna target a specific x or y property, you have to go frame.origin. But if you just want to change the width of the height, you can just do it through frame. So if you run this, and do that. Does everyone understand this? So we're able to target single properties. So if we want to target a coordinate property, we have to do frame.origin.x or .y. If you want to change the width or the height, we have to do frame.width or frame.height. Otherwise, you can redraw the whole rectangle by doing the frame and doing a CGRect.
One question, how come in your Unit load, when you wanted to assign the red box to the main view, you didn't do a self dot? This is, I know this is content from a couple of classes before, but how come you use self in that one and then not in the one above for the red box?
Oh, just wasn't thinking.
Okay, okay.
No good, not good reason.
Which one is the right way to do it?
Self. I'll go with self. Yep. At least for now. Maybe later you can. It's important now while we're starting to work with new libraries to understand what belongs to the current class as we start bringing in new CocoaPods. After we get familiar with that, then you can give it on this about the self. Good.
Change the source one. It's here. Okay.
So we're just using it right there. Oh, that's because you do. Oh, that is right.
Yeah.
It's probably because it's running.
What were we doing in the capture view? Is that what was it showed?
Oh, because the
I
height.
said yes and no.
So, so it's running across the whole screen. So that there we go. That's good. Any questions with this?
Yeah, on this guy, so like you said, the last, so like if I have this image, and I have this yellow box, so equal child to the parent.
Yeah.
So like if I took this guy and moved him here, and I
Yeah.
that's this guy. So either do like create one first, or do the last one?
Yeah, it's because whenever you draw something last, that's one of the expressions.
Okay.
Or actually, sorry, whenever you enter the subview last, that's one of the expressions. So you switch the order at which you enter the subview. That will.
So we have, we made the buttons by putting it in the interface folder.
Yep.
We're programmatically making the so that means they're on top of the buttons that we created.
Yep.
Okay. Alright. I was jumping ahead, I have something with like position, don't mind.
Yeah, don't worry about positions yet. The point of this just is to realize things get a bit hairier as we get a bit more complex. Before we go to all the layouts, let's do a quick exercise and draw. Let's draw a face that has a mouth and two eyes. Programmatically. And then if you want to be ambitious, let's add a button over here. And when you select the button, the face becomes the full width and the full height of the phone, and the eyes and the mouth get repositioned accordingly.
So that's not taking up the whole phone?
Yeah, initially, no, make it whatever height you would like.
Doesn't matter what phone?
Uh-huh.
Doesn't matter what phone?
No matter what phone. And let's try to also make it so it's centered in our, this is a second bonus, let's center it in our phone.
Is this a new project or doing it?
Up to you, yeah, up to you. Okay. Nice. Yeah, that's good. So the button expands the whole face to be the width and the height of the phone, and move the mouth at the bottom and the eye at the top.
Oh, I didn't understand the pathways. Sorry, what's the, because I did something completely different.
Oh, sorry, I was
I
with you
did,
guys.
I did this, I just made the show face and it would, crash the program. I was just making a button, just, made a face, so there's,
Oh no, yeah, sorry, I just did button here. So make the face full width and height.
so it's initially supposed to not be the full width and height.
Nope, initially square, preferably in the middle on the screen.
Can you actually have me out for a second? I'll what's going on. Okay, so I made a button called show face.
Yep.
Okay. Storyboard. I don't have I just have the button, I don't have it, linking to this new thing, but it's a face view controller. And I gave it a storyboard idea of face view.
Yep.
Okay, so here, when we click the button, I do left mouth, you see the stage view controller with identifier. Face view has face view controller.
Yep.
Then self-top present view controller. Now you see the animation middle.
Yep.
And then it crouches. And this is, I mean, it's just making.
Have you tried, to see if there's anything wrong with the button for the coalition?
Which thing with the. Oh, this is the wrong one.
No.
Just move this here.
Um.
So-
start by,
So that's just use that.
Yeah.
Did you say we're making full screen with the button?
oh, this needs to be capitalized.
Um, so then here,
Also needs to be a word. It will yell at you. Doesn't mean oh gosh. Maybe not.
Oh,
HBC was space view.
okay, I probably should have caught that.
But yeah, the controllers are just like, controllers are just like, they're classes, right? So they should follow the class protocols. Class rules, rather.
Right. Yeah, I guess because when I did like the new file, I just did like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so I didn't know that that has to actually be uppercase.
Yeah, and it also needs, pretty sure it still does, it needs the controller keyword input.
Oh, it does need controller, like it, so if it doesn't say view controller, it doesn't say control at the end, it's,
I'll double check, but yeah, it used to be elevated.
okay. Good to know. Alright, so basically all I'm gonna do now is in this view, make it full screen, I guess. Just make the top like,
Do you have to resize all of the boxes, or is there a way to resize them together?
Yeah, so if you make boxes the size of the box is relative to the parent box, then it will resize it automatically.
Oh, I see.
No, it's similar to what we did, right? So you make like the left eye, for example, be the width of the parent container, for example, divided by 5, and the height of the parent container divided by 5. That's just a general number. Yes.
So I kind of just started with that. I didn't need the button to it. I just wanted it to be like always constant, but like if I define what you want to use, certain colors.
Yeah.
And then put in X, but the super be divided by 4, so it should be a quarter.
Yes.
And the height should be a quarter also.
Yeah.
And 20 cents. So that one should show up in my spot.
Let's see.
It's 20 too small.
No. Shouldn't be. Oh, you didn't add subview.
so I have a question.
Alright, question.
I wanted
Okay,
to,
I'll be right there.
I want to programmatically add a toggle button in the screen. So first of all, I can't do text, like I don't know how to do text to the button, and I also don't know how to make the size of the button be so that the text, so it's good.
Yeah, so we can go over that. So first question was,
First I need to give it text, so I
Text, yeah.
installed that on the toggle button, so I can't do.
you do set title, I believe. And then you give it the, so normal, I think is the,
Size.
yeah, press enter there. And then go to the right, do press period. Just need that.
need to learn how to make it so that it fits in the size of whatever my tank is.
Yeah, so first give it a frame, then we'll do that. So,
Okay, so,
and that's just for the width, that the height doesn't matter, right?
yeah, so I was gonna say, right now, 20.
Yeah, and then do top button, and then do in size to fit.
That's it?
Yep.
So it's gonna be difficult to, okay, so then if I want to figure out, okay, so then here I do, and then, center, so
Good?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, so
We should, is there a better way to do this without keep playing around?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
So that's where we can reference other items and make assumptions of that, right? So first of all,
Yeah.
one good practice here is you want to name things a bit more semantically, right? Red box 1, 2, or 3. So if you had more facial element, 5, 6, 7, so you want to have left eye, right eye. But it's okay. So is this 1, is this 2, is this 3, or how?
Yes.
Okay. So for 1, you want to make it so it's always on the top left, right? So first of all, the starting position I think is easy, right? 0, 0, top left, right? Now the height and the width need to be relative to the parent container, right? So you want to have it be like a tenth of the parent container.
Okay, that's what you were doing.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So over here you do something like, self dot yellow box dot width divided by 5, whatever the ratio is, and save the width. So give that a try.
how do you do the initial ones? So with the height, what's the initial? If these are width and height, then what are these? What is this?
X1, X1
yeah.
with like. Yep. So the order is over there. Now we get to do frame the origin to get the X and Y coordinates. The origin of X.
Okay, that's what I was getting. Okay, great.
And then you also have a breakpoint. I want to talk a lot, otherwise it'll be fragile.
Thank you. All right, I'll figure out.
Oh, nice.
Figure it out.
Yeah, you have to recall the function. If you guys want to try and change the orientation and have it reorient the face, if you put everything in the function, you can run the function. There's a method whenever you rotate, it's override function. What was the method? If you look up on Google for Swift orientation change function, it's an override function. Yeah.
Next to one.
So that's the amount, right? Or what is that?
This is the
So, so I would make this width divided by 5, not minus 5. Because width minus 5 is going to be pretty much at the very end, minus 5 points. But divided by 5 would be significantly smaller, right? And I'll do the same thing for height. Yeah, so the first 0 is the x coordinate, so it starts in the very left corner. And the second 0 is the y, so it starts at the very top. So you can add some padding if you want to make it like 10, 10. There we go. So very similar to the other one.
It's not getting bigger, even though I have this divided by 8. The big gray one's getting bigger. The little eye is a little bigger.
Yeah, so the reason for that is you are only drawing this in unit load. So the hint is separating it here, but in the function and call the function when you press it.
I see. Got it. Okay. Thanks.
But that's good.
I think that he just gave that I said so.
Yeah.
But
Basically.
so,
Nice.
but so I'm assuming to like put a box around this because right now I'm just alive.
You know.
Yeah. But how do I have to refactor to like the eyes of the box?
So right now, yeah, so you're adding all those components to the view. So you would have to add like a head.
Yeah.
And then instead of yourself would be a sub view, just view self the head as a view.
Which one?
To show your face like that.
Yeah, it's a little one.
You have first defined head.
You later on your eyes.
And then it's your mouth.
Exactly.
That would be first time. Second time. Why not? Why couldn't I just add it as a sub view?
You have the eyes and mouth.
Yeah. Oh, no, because
What are we supposed to have?
what this is doing is this would be adding heads to so over here, you want to add this view head, right?
Got it.
Yeah, the first one is where you're adding to.
Got it.
So did you have to repeat the function?
Yeah, whenever you press the button. All right. Nicely done. Here you go. That's good. You're a much more visual person then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Go your head. I'll let you guys figure it out, but I'll also do this really quickly before we jump into auto layout. So, main storyboard, and Yellow box. I'll delete this. Okay. So let's head eye, right eye, mouth, and I'll just redraw all these. So I'll do a function draw mouth, function draw eyes, and then so we'll say self dot mouth dot frame as a CG rect, and X will be self dot view frame dot origin dot X minus, give it a 50. Self dot view dot frame dot, oh, it's just a
Just one report. Vision.
view dot frame dot width, height will make it 50, and then we'll do self dot mouth dot back. Color is UI color, red color. Origin. Okay. And then self dot head dot frame as a CG rect, and we'll give it an X of self dot view dot frame width divided by 2 minus 200, and self dot view dot frame dot height divided by 2 200. Does everyone understand why I'm doing this? I'm centering it, right? So I'm getting the width of the parent, dividing in half, and moving it to the left by a certain amount, right?
I was not centering it though, if you're gonna set up different screen sizes, like if you move it 200.
Because it's relative to the head size.
You're not putting any of this in the viewed load, right?
I'm going to call the function from viewed load, but I'm abstracting that from viewed load because when I hit the button, I want these to redraw themselves.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Then we'll say the width is 200, height is 200. So I should make this 100 here. And self.head.background color. UI color. Color. Okay. and draw eyes. So self dot left eye frame is a C direct, and we'll start by and width will be self dot head dot frame dot width divided by 10. Self dot head dot frame dot height divided by 10. Self dot left eye dot background color dot blue. I'm gonna copy paste here for the interest of time. Right eye, and the X will be self.head.frame.width minus 10. Does it make sense why it's that? Because we want it to be placed at the very right with 10 padding, right? So far, so good. So we have our head, we have our eyes, we have our mouth. And we have our redraw, okay? And then from my head, I'll call all the other functions. So I'll say self.draw eyes, self.draw mouth. And then my top here, I'm writing a lot of code with the testing here. You guys should not do this. So this is before adding the button. So then I'll do self.view.add subview head, right? Self.head.head subview left eye, self.add subview right eye, subview mouth, and then call draw head. I'm sure there'll be something wrong with this. A whole bunch of stuff I typed without testing. Okay. Looks like a flag almost. Okay, so our mouth is all wrong. So let's see what's going on with my mouth. So I did the mouth relative to the view, right? Head, same with the eyes. So my right eye is, the Y should be a
Should be
10.
the same. It should be the same. Right?
Yeah. Getting there. So why is the eye on the right here? So tell me.
Its initial position was Yeah.
The width of itself.
It's the what?
Its initial position kind of started on the edge, and then its own size kind of moved it over a little bit, and then you subtracted it.
Yeah, so we need to subtract not minus 10, we need to subtract the width of itself over here. So we need to do something like self dot right eye dot frame dot width,
Minus 10 again.
and then minus 10 to add more padding. Yep. This is why constraints are useful, guys. Because things get a lot trickier. Okay, so our x for our right eye is the width of the frame minus the width of the right eye minus 10. That's right. Let's see. I might need to do. It might not know its own width yet. So we might have to do that. There we go. So what was going on here is I was trying to figure out, and this is a whole bunch of math. You're never going to have to do this because we're going to use auto layout, but it just works to talk about it. So what I was doing here, I was trying to figure out the width of itself so I could subtract it from the right margin, but we didn't yet know the width of the rectangle because it wasn't drawn, right? So it was getting the width of the original rectangle, therefore it wasn't pushing it as far. And then the mouth, finally, should be able to just actually do that. Height is 50. It should be working. No, it pushes it further down. Minus 50. Should be working.
How big is the head? The head bigger than 50?
The head right now is 200 by 200.
Origin of the head minus.
Yeah, it is origin. I wonder. Still not quite right. We're drawing the head first. Yeah, we are. What's going on? Head frame origin. And I'm not sure why it's doing it. I don't want to spend too much time on it, to be honest. It's gonna be something really silly. Okay, I'll just leave it here for now. And then the transformation, we want to call, there's a couple of ways of going about it. We can give, when we call draw head, we can give it the size. So we can say the width, which is in float, and the height, which is a float. So when we call the head, draw head initially, we'll say 200 by 200. And here we'll say width, height. And then we'll call the CG float it's asking. Oh, CG float, that's why. But to make the type that we pass in is a CG float, not a float. So then over here, we'll do draw head again. And we'll give it self.view.frame.width, self.view.frame.height. You guys should help me debug this. So what's going on here, it was yelling at me when I was calling the function because this is a closure. And in closures, this is kind of like disconnected from our class. It's kind of the temporary like outside loop of our class. So for us to be able to get back to the class level, because we're at a different level in the closure, we have to do the self. We'll go over closures like in probably 3 weeks. So Xcode created it for us. All right. Let's cross our fingers. It's what?
It seems impossible to learn on your own. It's like so many nuances to execute.
We also need to set the X and Y, right? So I wanted to give it a X CG float, Y CG float. So then we'll pass up here this.
So does it matter what order you put the parameters in? Because
It doesn't as long as you call them in the same order. It's gonna yell at me. And then I'll say 0, 0. There we go. All right. That finally should do it.
Can you post this later?
Yeah. So the mouth flew away. Draw mouth. You guys should get in the habit of debugging, so help me out here. Help a brother out. Okay, so the mouth, when we're redrawing, it gets called again. So we're saying to the very left. So the Y is where things are going wrong here. So head, frame.
So it's going 100 pixels above the head.
Yep.
So you want it to be actually at self dot head dot frame dot height minus origin. Minus
You're right, it's that height. And that's the problem. That was the problem. Good call. There we go. And then let me run this one more time, and I'll redraw it on here. Cool. Questions? So this is, I mean, in terms of how things work, I think it makes sense, right? We have our X and Y, width and height, and everything is relative to those. But you can see, even with like a super simple example of like only 5 elements, how things get really, really messy having to redraw them over and over again, right? So that's why the manual route is not a good one, which is a good transition to auto layout. But before we do that, you guys want to take a quick break? Yeah, let's do a quick 10-minute break.
So if I can go for a second.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, in here, what we were talking is, I'm making the width of the line. Here's the high. Left eye width to 15, 15, right? So I'm doing it in frame, frame by minus 25, frame by plus 25.
Yep.
And the mouth is,
Wait. Also, you're putting them close to the center rather than the sides. Okay.
right, so
Okay.
this is me making it smaller, this is making small, and this is making
Gotcha.
okay, so let me just show you what it looks like. So here's how it initially is, it's initially a full size on the bottom. Now, this is in the middle, and that's in the middle, but goes to
Yeah.
and I'm pretty sure, like, if you like, to see that. So here's where it's making it smaller.
And then when tell us, probably.
It goes back down. So it's just those eyes that are not centered. So I'm making them with 50, so I'm minus 25. Should I do minus 50? Oh, this one maybe should be minus 50, and that one should be at 0. Yeah, because that would put.
Oh, yep. It's a good idea to do that.
So I'm gonna make it, I want to make this minus 55.
Okay.
So now it should. Oh, why did that work?
I think I missed. Oh, yeah. It's 2 pages.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So what I was doing was minus 25, which I was doing was, so basically, the left eye was directly in the middle, and the right eye was next
Yeah. Because it wasn't relative to this really. It seems like it was, Yeah, just putting it more. Yep. This is the fun stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm finally able to Wi-Fi.
Which one?
Finally-
You are?
Yeah.
You say anything?
New Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Now, I asked Dave to work great.
I wonder if like at some point it was blacklisted for some reason or
I had never been here.
it's weird.
Yeah, anyway, I can not be second one.
Yeah. You're not constrained to the Ethernet. I'll put this up right now so I don't forget about it.
No audio now, is that just constrained?
Yep. And it's all about relationships. Here we're having to do the relationships manually and reset them every time. With auto layout, you initially set the relationship, and when you change the main thing that everything follows, everything else changes.
You could do that in the code with variables, right?
And the what?
Make a variable that's the width of your super view, and then make a variable that's.
I mean, sure, but then you're still having to worry about all that. Auto layout, although in code it's a bit cumbersome because you have to set a lot of settings, you don't have to worry about passing those variables back and forth so many times. All right. This is on lesson 10 folder. I'll get started in 1 minute here.
So it's in the which one? It's in the lesson 10?
Lesson 10, yep. All right. No, I just posted up the solution we just did. So we drew our views programmatically and set the frame, but if you place your views in Interface Builder and reference them in our controllers, you can still change the frame the same way, right? It's still the same reference. All right. So this was the manual way of doing things. before iOS 5. iOS 5 is when auto layout came out, and actually the first year auto layout was buggy as hell, like it was unusable. Before auto layout, we had this, basically what we're doing now, and springs and struts, which is kind of a simpler version of this. But springs and struts basically let us align things left or right and set the width and height according to the parent container. But we can never set relationships with siblings. So if we had two elements at the same level, they were never really aware of each other, right? We could set the size according to the parent, and we could do some black magic and some configurations and be like, half the parent. But whenever you had dynamic relationships between two elements, which usually most of the interaction happens between two elements at the same level when things move back and forth, right? You couldn't really do that. You had to do it manually most of the time. So auto layout is what really what helps us with this tremendously. So auto layout, basically the way it works is we set relationships between things. But before the relationships, there's one thing to understand. So first of all, the best practice for setting things up in auto layout is starting from the top down. So just like CGRect, drawing things manually, auto layout is essentially doing the CGRect, the frame setting in the background, but it's doing it kind of through a different language. So we still need to, through our constraints, make assumptions about the width, the height, and the x and the y. However, the approach for it is slightly different. So instead of saying we want this to be at 0, 0 and be this high and this width, we could say something like we want our container to be 10 points from the left, 10 points from the top. We could say 100 points from the right, and let's say 200 points from the bottom. So what this does is our phone moves, these sizes change because our constraints are the only things that we're setting absolutely. Right? Now, if I was to not set a right and a left, a trailing and a bottom constraint, I would have to give this a width and a height. So we still have, through some form of assumption, meet all these requirements. So let's do another example that will help us kind of understand a bit more. So I have another box here I'm gonna draw, right? And I want this box to, again, to sit below this box, and I want this box to have a certain height, a certain width, and I want it to be aligned with this one, right? So the constraints we can set here are, instead of saying, I want this to be 10 points from the left, I can say, I want this box's left margin to be the same as this box's left margin. So I don't have to give this an absolute position, value. And I want the position from the top of this to be 20 points from this one. So now we have a x and y, even though we never specifically said, 220, right? Because it's relative to this one in both cases, right? Now, for us to fulfill the x and y, or the width and the height, we can either say set an absolute width and absolute height, or give it a trailing space and a bottom constraint, or we could make it be the same as this one. So the constraints are essentially building relationships by which we still have to meet the x and y coordinate and the width and height, right? We don't have to explicitly say the width and the height. We can, auto layout can assume those for us if we give it the other specifics. So we either need to set a width and the height, either absolutely or in relation to another container, or we need to set all four coordinates, the x1, the y1, the x2, and the y2. Right? So x1, y1. Suppose I have another box here, and I wanted it to be right here. What constraints would I set?
How to do the top, and the right, and the left.
The top and the right and the left. Right. So what would the right be?
I guess like 20 pixels or whatever.
Yeah.
20 points.
20 points here. What would the left one be?
I guess 30 also 20 points. I mean, it would depend. Also, those 20 points.
So we could either give this a 20-point difference between this one and this one, or we can give this a width, right? If we give it, we don't have to give it a width if we give it a distance between this one, because it assumes the width based on the space with this, right? So the width then becomes fluid based on our size and orientation.
So just to go over again, you said that the width and the height are only necessary if you don't give two of the constraints.
Yep.
So if you give three of the constraints, the top, the right, the top, and the left, so you gave three, you just didn't give the bottom, you wouldn't have to give the width, just the height.
Just the height. Yep.
This is springs and struts, or?
This is constraints of layout.
When you're talking about points, are points a relative measure of the parent's view? So that when, say you're using it in an iPad, you can get bigger, the point adapts to what the new screen is.
Yeah, so it's not relative to the parent, it's relative to whatever you tie it to. You're relative to anything. If you want this thing, for example, to have a fluid width, so when we switch orientation over an iPad, we wouldn't say the width of this will be 100. We would just say that the spacing between this would be, I don't know, 50, right?
To calculate, let's say we don't know exactly how many points we want, but we know that we want that the margins of the main board to be like, everything should be like 5%. So if I wanted to calculate that as 5%, I would have to do like the self.view.width times, 0.05. And this will give me that many points.
Self-view 20.05. So when we do it programmatically, that's a bit more straightforward because it relates to this a lot more. When we do this through auto layout, it's a bit trickier. Instead of doing getting the relative, actually I'll show you in a second. It's the multiplier that we work with in that scenario.
So there's a fixed number of points for any given string, also a fixed number of points, right? So
Exactly. Exactly. That's why you don't usually want to have a constraint from like the right corner to be like 400 points, because there's devices that aren't even 400 points wide, right? So you'd rather want to do something like give it a leading space here of 20 points and give it a width relative to units. And the weights are the left margin, right margin are called as leading space, trailing space. So let's do a quick exercise because drawing auto layout is a bit trickier than frames because it's very multiple. So let's create a new project. And I'll call this auto layout. Let's work. So I'd like us to build, let me go back here. I'd like us to build essentially this guy. Responsive, right? You see the body is multiple. So we'll start with the head. And again, for today, we'll only do this through Interface Builder. So we'll just work with views. And let's make the head.
So now we're not changing the constraints of the storyboard to be like compact.
Yeah, from this point on, we'll go to universal. Yeah. So before we get started, there's a few ways to deal with constraints. First way of adding constraints is by drag and dropping control to the storyboard or to the other objects. So if you hold on control and you drag and drop from the object to our storyboard, you'll see the storyboard light up. And we give this vertical spacing.
What's the free vertical spacing to top left guide and center horizontal?
So center horizontally in container centers it in the middle of your horizontal.
And then the other one that we did.
So the vertical spacing, and we'll also actually center it horizontally. So if you drag to the top one more time. Now, if you want to center stuff horizontally or vertically, you drag it to the opposite axis. So if you want to center something vertically, you drag it to the right or to the left. If you want to center something horizontally, you drag it to the top or the bottom.
So you can say that one more time?
So if you want to center an object vertically,
Yeah.
you drag the arrow to the right or the left. If you want to center it horizontally, you drag it to the top or the bottom.
So when I did the view top thing, it didn't make that line that it made like a little space.
That's fine. It's yelling at me already. It's yelling at me because right now, and it will be very explicit in its error messages. It's nice to find interface builder constraints. It's yelling at me. It's red because right now I have positioning, but I don't have the width and the height constraint set, right? So our first way of adding these constraints is by drag and dropping from our object to either storyboard or other objects. And we can also access our constraints two ways, through our document outline. Remember, constraints are objects. Everything is an object in Interface Builder. So we see our constraints here. Or we can select our object and then go in our little size panel here, size inspector, and you see the constraints listed here. So you can remove by just clicking and pressing delete, or we can edit those values from here.
So what were the two constraints you did? You control drag up and you did the first two?
The vertical, the control dragged up again, I did center horizontally.
We can make that head a square now.
We can, yeah. But let's go through the third way of drawing the constraint. So we can access constraints from document outline. We can access them from our size inspector. We can drag and drop constraints, right? The other way we can add constraints is through our pin. Right here, the little square icon. So select our object and select the pin. And the pin lets us add constraints for our positioning and for our width and height. So we've already set our positioning, so we don't want to do that. If we wanted to do the positioning, we would select the axis we want to position.
Wait, how did you get this add new constraints thing? You put the pin in that one?
So just the pin. Make sure you have the object selected.
If you add another constraint, like that becomes a problem, right?
Yep. So if you have duplicate constraints, X will yell at you. We'll go over that. So we have our vertical alignment and our horizontal alignment, right? So we need our width and our height. Whenever we have an object like that in Interface Builder, the size that it's currently at will be the size that that is displayed over here. We just need to set the constraints by checking them. So this will set the constraints of a width and height for our head. And let's make it more square, right? So let's make this 150 by 150. Now override that. And then before we select save, there's a drop down here under update frames. If we hit save, our position of our object will not change. It will stay as is. Our rulers will change, but our head will stay still. So if you do the drop down, select items of new constraints. This will essentially update our object with the constraints we changed in our pin. So we're now blue, right? There's no more red.
What does orange mean?
Orange means there's a warning where things won't be totally off the screen, but it probably won't look like you want it to look like. Or it might mean that that you might have set a constraint and it's not updated in your view.
I don't understand what this view dot, I understand the view dot center x is equal to center x and centering it horizontally.
Mhm.
But the view dot top is equal to the top layout guide at bottom.
Where do you see the view at the top?
That is the constraint that is added when you control drag up and you did the, if you go to your attributes inspector, you want your document outline, I mean?
Yep.
And the second one, no, sorry, the first one. This was the one that was created when you control drag up from the objects, from the view.
Oh, so this just adds this adds spacing between this and top there.
Right, so you have a constant of 0. So that constant, that all that stuff got auto-filled out when we dragged it, and it was relative, it was based off where we dragged the view initially onto our screen.
Yeah, so when we drag stuff from our object to our screen, it's relative to where the object is right now.
Right, so because I dragged mine into a different spot, I have a different constant. And it's saying that the top of the parent view controller, of the actual view controller, is equal to the bottom. Wait, what is it again?
So I'll remove this and ends again. So remove that, and I drag and drop to the top, and vertical spacing to top layout guide. This adds kind of the margin up here between our red object and that.
Okay.
So if I run this really quickly, we should see that no matter the orientation or the size, it will still stay aligned in the center and top.
We have just one, but how do you get it to work like a perfect square in the environment? Not just when it was simulated.
So did you set the 150 by 150 in the pin? So you might have to click on this auto layout issues, resolve auto layout issues, and update frames. If you're getting the asked about the orange, so if you select the update auto layout, do update frames, I'll update the frames according to your constraints. The other way of going about it is in your document outline or in your top right corner here, you'll see a warning. If you click the warning, it'll take you to the constraints and document outline. You can click that and they'll auto-resolve it for you. Okay, so we have our head. Let's actually make the head a bit smaller. Let's go 90 by 90. So in our size inspector, we'll do the height and the width to be 90.
So you can change all of your constraints over here all the time?
Yep. Well, the ones that you've added through Interface Builder, not the ones you've added through code.
Okay.
It's actually a pain in the butt to mix the two together, unlike the other things. So everybody have this? So let's talk through this really quick. So we have our head, and our head, no matter what, will always be at the top, right? And will always be a certain size. So our head's always up here. So then I want to have a body. I want to have two hands. And then we also want to have feet that are connected to this body, right? And the way it's going to work is, regardless of the size, our hands are always going to expand. Our body will always stay the same width, always be fixed. And our feet will always be grounded, right? So let's also make our feet a certain height. So we'll say 100. We'll make this 50. So let's talk to this. How would we, what's next in the process? We have our head pinned. So what else do we have to pin?
The arms.
The arms, but the arms location will be relative to the body. So we need to have the body before the arms, right? So if we do the body next, what are we pinning the body to?
Legs.
Right? We do legs. So we don't have the legs yet. Right? So the legs are always going to be the bottom. So we should probably do the legs next because the body is fluid. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Could we pin the arms to the left and the right?
Yeah, we're going to have the left and the right.
Oh, but they're not fixed.
But if the body, yeah, the body is not there yet. Yeah. So let's start with the legs.
Wait, why are we talking about the legs and not the body?
Because the body will be, the height of the body will be contingent on the legs. Right? Because the body will always touch the legs. Right?
The body doesn't go to the wall, it just goes to the legs.
It just goes to the legs. Exactly.
And the legs are always on the bottom.
The legs are over the body. Yeah. So we start with absolute facts first, and everything else gets formed around those absolute facts. So let's draw the legs. Do a view here, and legs will be black. All right. Oh, did I ever show you guys how to duplicate something in Interface Builder? So if you hold down Alt, you can drag a duplicate. Huh? Command C, Command V also works. Oh, Command D duplicate. Yep, that also works. No, actually. Okay. So let's start with the things that we know about legs. First fact is that the legs will always be pinned to the bottom, right? So how do we pin it to the bottom?
Control drag down.
Yep, Control drag down and give it's a 0.
What is give it a 0? Where is it off of that?
So I'm actually gonna have to do this. I have to move this up here, and I'll drag it down, and vertical spacing to bottom layer.
When you edit it.
Yep. So then we go to our bottom constraint and make that 0. So when you see this number here, plus or minus something, this is what you're seeing, Pat, when you have the orange warning. So it means that your constraint was changed, but your frame was not updated, right? So you guys remember to update the frame? Go in our layout issues resolve. And update frames. Son of a gun. Let's not do it yet.
Is that because we didn't set the width and the height?
Yep, we haven't set a width and a height or a left or right. So we'll just add the bottom constraints for now. So we're at 0. And let's also make the bottom constraint for this one equal to the bottom constraint for that one. So if we drag and drop from one object to the other, we see the things we can duplicate from it, we can inherit from it. So drag and dropping from the right leg to the left leg, we can set the bottom constraint to be the same.
So the originator is the one that's in control.
Let's drag to.
Wait, what was the, you control drag from one to the other?
Yep, I control drag from the right one to the left one, and I set the bottom of the right one to be the same as the bottom of the left one. So we have our Y2 position, right? So next, let's give it a width and a height. So I'll start with the left one, and we'll go in our pin. And I'll just stick to what we have for now. So I just check the width and the height. And I'm not going to update frames yet. So the reason I'm updating the frames is because we haven't set all the constraints. So if I update the frames now, this is probably going to go all the way to the left because we don't have a left position for it yet, a left constraint. So if I add the two constraints, that's set in place. So I can now drag from the right one to the left one again and make it equal widths and equal height.
So when you do that, can you alter the height of either one of those, or can you only alter the height of one of them?
You can alter the height of both, but if only you alter the height of the left one, the right one will change. All right, so we still have not set a X position for these two, right? And that's because it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? We have our bottom position, we have our width and our height. But our X is going to be relative to what?
To the body.
To the body, right?
But you know how much the body is.
You know what?
You know how much the body's gonna impact. You can say it's a separation. It's whatever your width is for the body.
Of the body, right? We don't know yet what the body is though. So we have to first add the body. So it's chicken and egg because we have to first pin these to the bottom, add the body to be fluid, height between these, and then we'll base the location of these based on the body. So drag a new view, and let's make this, I don't know, green. Now, one thing to note here is I want us to get used to whenever we're dragging and dropping stuff in Interface Builder. I mentioned in the first class, you're going to see guidelines. Get used to following those guidelines. It'll make working with constraints a bit easier. So whenever I'm dragging here, you'll see that a ruler gets dragged here, right? So it's a guideline basically telling us that it's centered with the top one. All right, so our body needs to be tied to our head. It needs to be tied to our legs as well, right? So let's start with that. So I'll drag it to the top, and I'll say vertical spacing, and I'll change the vertical spacing to 0. To the head, yep. And then let's drag from the body to the left leg. And we'll do vertical spacing again. And we'll make this also 0. Yep. I'm sorry?
So it's still giving me like 100. Oh, there we go.
Yep. And also drag it to the bottom, so the other one has the bottom. Yep. No, just those. Yep. Don't update. Not yet. Because it's gonna move them. So.
That's what they show.
Yeah. Yeah, it's moving them. Yeah. So that's why we're not updating yet, because we'll move them out of the.
Okay.
All right. So then, next step is we want to add the relative position between the legs and the body, right?
We want to give the body a fixed width.
That's actually a good point. Let's give the body a fixed width. So one thing we can do is we can make the body half the size of the head. So if we drag to the head, we can do equal widths. And for the multiplier, instead of 1, we'll do 0.5. So basically it's saying make the body the same width as the head and make it 50% of that.
Where do you? Oh,
From the edit, yep.
you said control drag, and then you said equal width to the head.
Yep.
How do you quit the multiplier?
And oh, okay. And you say multiplier is
0.5.
Yeah.
So 50%.
Control,
So let's also center our body horizontally. So to center horizontally, where do we drag? Yeah, vertical, right? So we'll say center horizontally in container. I'm sorry?
You did.
Yeah, not to the head. And then let's add the relationship between the legs and the body. So we'll say trailing space.
you went from the leg to the body or the body to the leg?
Leg to the body. Although you can go other, yeah, leg to the body. Yep.
So if you would have done it the other way, you would have. Okay.
So trailing?
Yep. Because trailing space is the space after the leg between the body.
So that should be 0.
Should be 0. And then we drag from the right leg to the body, and there'll be leading space. So leading. And that is also 0. So really quick before we update frames, we should first of all have all the constraints we need to have these stand still on our storyboard. So if we update frames, hopefully none of these will disappear if our constraints are right. But let's click on our warning sign here because we haven't updated our frames. And Xcode will say frame will be different at runtime, right? That basically just means that our frames have not been updated after we added the constraints. So I can just do it from here. Update frames. Oh. Lost the leg.
Should the leading and the trailing be set to something different than 0? Relative to the width or something?
Let's see. So we have our trailing. Yeah, let's remove the trailing and try something else. Let's also remove the leading here. So horizontal spacing is what I wanted. So horizontal spacing between our left leg and the body and the right leg and the body. All right. Let's try this one more time.
And get rid of the vertical.
The vertical, you want the vertical to be 0 between the two.
I don't understand why we did that. Why did we have to do the horizontal versus the
So the difference is because leading and trailing, I think is just relative to the parent container, to the sides over here, whereas horizontal spacing is between these two sibling objects.
So where is the horizontal spacing go?
I'm sorry?
Does it go between one leg and the body? Or?
Yeah, one leg of the body. Yep.
I mean, I would have assumed that if you, with what we did, it would have done the, like, what we found the first time, which was the leg should be horizontally aligned to the body, instead of like having the right edge of the left leg aligned to the left edge of the body.
Well, yeah, this is what the horizontal spacing does. Initially, we were doing the leading space. So leading space is just the difference between this and, we had trailing space here. So trailing space is the difference between this, and leading space is the difference between this and left corner. Whereas the horizontal space between these two is the exact spacing over here. That's the difference. Leading space is the object and the parent, and then horizontal space is two objects. Yeah, I'll post one as well. We'll do this again on Monday.
What does it mean when in the document outline when some of the constraints are gray? You have like 3 of them, also 3 of them that are gray.
I think it means that they're no longer active because they're being overridden by something. Although I'm not sure why the head here is being overridden by anything. Let me see. Yeah, I'm not sure why this one's great because it's not being overridden by anything.
also having difficulty figuring out, like, so if you click on one of those guys in the document outline, I'm not sure what, like, if I click on one, I don't know what it's actually, what constraint that really is. It's saying view.center x or view.top is equal to view.bottom, but
It should highlight it over here in the interface builder.
it's, yeah, but it's, alright, so like if you click on, so I mean, I see like a bunch of them highlighted.
Well, it's only one that it highlights, I think. Right. It might highlight numerous ones, but they're really the objects in the storyboard. They're still part of the same constraint. So let's do the final step here before we kind of review real quick. So let's drag the arms. So I'll make the arm orange. So how are we positioning our arms? Yep, so we'll say to the head, and this will be vertical spacing, and to the body, horizontal spacing, to the wall, trailing space. And then finally the height, exactly. So we'll do the same thing, we'll duplicate this one. And we'll first of all make equal height and just equal height actually. So equal heights, do leading space, drag it to the head for vertical space, drag it here for horizontal space. Uh-oh. Someone our man. Let's see what's going on. So we see that we got an error here, warning. Positions are ambiguous. View. So. Top space. So the width and the horizontal position. Trailing space. Oh, we didn't do the position here to the body, I think. There we go. All right, so if we run this again. There we go. Doozy. There's lots of chicken and egg problems here, right? So we'll start working with constraints on everything from this point on.
So all the apps pre-2012 were done programmatically?
Pre-2005 or 2011. Should be on the users if you look at that.
Yeah, it said pages and they use review. So this guy, what is highlighting? What's being highlighted? Is this guy?
This one, yeah. So if you drag it and make it full height for this one. So get used to the warning, guys. If Xcode is warning you for any constraints, get used to reading these messages. Actually, normal Swift errors that may not be helpful, but constraint errors are usually very helpful. Xcode.
Great.
How do you link the body from the legs?
What?
How do you link the body to the legs?
Yeah, so the body would drag the body to the legs, and that was the constraint for vertical spacing. And then we dragged the legs to the body, and that was horizontal spacing.
How do you do the two legs?
I'm sorry?
How do you do the two legs? Like,
Yeah, so the left leg is dragged to the body,
okay.
and that's horizontal spacing. And the right leg is dragged to the body, and it's also horizontal spacing.
How do you, my body keeps disappearing.
It keeps what?
Disappearing. So I dragged it to the end before about and then now. There. Yeah, I just got some good ones. Especially when you first get the white house first time. So, when I work from home, did that class, but otherwise. No.
Yeah, so the height by default is there. Is the height of this head segment.
You're on hold. Yeah. Your arms are.
I took the arms off because I couldn't hear.
Yeah, because it doesn't have.
Yeah, I did put strength there.
So the body was using.
All over. White marsh.
I'm getting skinnier.
Here's not a guy. Huge, but there's subways. Okay.
We'll just have to struggle.
All right, I'll see you, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, guys, the midterms are already posted on under assessments, so feel free to get started. It's due in a week and a couple days. It's due in 10 days, and you already have all the knowledge you can have completed. So feel free to pair up. Actually, I suggest everybody pairs up. So pair up with somebody else.
So to make the arm go all the way. Is that a good Sunday? Yeah.
Right.
Make the arm go all the way.
This was a lot.
Good question for me.
Yeah, I am not getting that way.
Sure. Yeah.
Great. It's a lot of content.
Yeah.
So the major is calculator, so.
It's a calculator. Yeah, we'll talk about it Monday as well, but just work on that over the weekend. It pretty much covers everything we've done so far.
Let's do next Sunday or?